But I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I'm here to present our strategic plan for the next 3 years or so, which I've called DCS Forward. My name's Jim Niedermeier. I'm the new superintendent this year. You've gotten plenty of emails from me already, so if you haven't unsubscribed from me, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm really excited to be talking about stuff other than safety concerns and health concerns tonight, but I know that that's still present on everybody's mind, so if there are questions about that at the end, I would be happy to answer them. So I do want to talk about other things, though. So it's really been a pleasure to be at Duanesburg. I really love the community and I really love the schools. When I first started at Duanesburg, I talked to an awful lot of people. I talked to all the staff and also talked to a lot of members of the community, and then also did some focus groups with some other people that were involved in the school in some way. And then another part of my onboarding was to gather a lot of data on the district and to analyze that as I determined, what steps need to be taken going forward. I'm really excited that we're actually at a point where we can see the end in sight for this current pandemic, so that we know that there is a going forward. And I think it's really important to remember that and to keep focused on what's next after all this, because I think that there's some really positive things that we have going for us as a district. So I'm excited to share those with you. So I want to present, before I start talking about different action steps we're going to be taking, I want to present some of the data that I found to you. So this one it's a very important stat. This is our enrollment trends. So you probably are aware that over the last several years, Duanesburg's been declining in enrollment. So at one time in 2009, Duanesburg was as big as 951 students. And currently we're at 664. A couple of other things have remained relatively constant. So the number of economically disadvantaged students has remained pretty constant. So has the number of special education students. And so as our numbers decline, that becomes a bigger slice of our pie because that numbers remain constant, everything else is going down. So that's our enrollment trend. There are some things that we can do to attract more people to our community, and I'll talk about those things as we go. But we do have really comparatively low rates for economically disadvantaged students and special ed students compared to other districts our size. Also wanted to share with you the value of Duanesburg. So compared to other school districts that are our size that have similar wealth, our operating expenses are actually quite low. So a little almost right in the middle of other schools our size. But also another thing that we have going for us, in addition to relatively low operating expense per pupil, is a really high graduation rate. So I'm not sure that everybody in the community knows, but Duanesburg definitely has the highest graduation rate of all the districts that are similarly sized with similar wealth. But also we have the highest graduation rate in Capital Region BOCES and have for the last couple of years. And so if you look at both of those things, the relatively low operating expenses and the high graduation rate, there's a lot of value for the education that we're providing at Duanesburg. I also looked at other kinds of data in addition to just statistics like that. We give surveys as a school district. This is from a survey that was given about 1.5 years ago on district culture and some other things. So this represents people's perception about things in the school, and it was a survey that was given to students, parents, and staff members. And so you can see the different columns show all of those different groups and their positivity toward different subject areas. They were asked questions, and then the survey sort of categorizes them after. So one of the things that I found when looking at these surveys were that parents and staff generally had a high positivity for the physical environment of Dwaynesburg and for the physical safety of students at Dwaynesburg. And so that's not a surprise to me being in this school. We have a really low rate of discipline. The facilities, even though there are some older facilities, they're really well kept, and the grounds are really well kept too. And I think that you can see too, if you look at things like physical safety and the physical environment, generally students score that a little bit lower than parents and staff. It's very difficult to get students to understand what these surveys are used for so that they're answering them as honestly as they can, or they could have been. But also continuing to do these surveys is a really important element. So students need to see that there's something that's actually done with this information. Parents and staff also had a really high positivity for the cultural competence of our district. So understanding that people come from different backgrounds, and whereas students generally did not have that same perception. Some different things that might be concerning, but definitely stood out to me, are that everybody generally had a low positivity of the mental health supports in our district, which was surprising to me as somebody coming from the outside, because for a district our size, we actually have quite a lot of mental health supports. We have 2 social workers, a psychologist, and also a mental health clinic that operates out of one of our schools, which is much more than many other schools. Even larger schools don't have that. And so for me, early on, one of the things that we've been trying to do is really get that message out there that we do have a lot of mental health resources in the district. Parents and students surveyed also reported a pretty low positivity for how bullying is handled in the schools. There was also a pretty low positivity for disciplinary practices, and also a low positivity for the way that substance abuse is seen in the schools. And so those are some of the things that stood out to me on that survey. But again, those are perception surveys. But even if those are inaccurate perceptions, there's still things that we need to address as a district, because perception really does become people's reality. Also, I took a look at a lot of course, achievement data. So state exam data, report card data, all different kinds of things that I could get my hands on that would tell me about how our students do in classes academically. So there are a lot of positive academic elements in the district. So the last state tests that were given in 2019. Everybody was exempt last year, no state tests given. And so what we saw on those tests that when they were given last is that you can see the kind of pinkish color represents times when we were below the Capital Region BOCES average scores, average proficiency rates, and the green is when we were above the average Capital Region proficiency scores. And so in 2019, one thing that you notice is that we were above average proficiency on every exam in elementary through and 3rd through 6th grade. So that's really outstanding. Also, you see some great growth areas. So for example, if you look at math, the 5th graders in math, so that would be down here, the 5th graders in math made a huge jump from the previous year. Also, so if you look from the 5th grade math was 40% proficiency in 2018, 63% in 2019. It's a big jump. And also, you don't just look at that. That shows kind of what the grade level is doing. But it's also really important to look at what that cohort is doing. And so you also saw things like the 6th grade cohort making super big gains in math from when they were 5th graders, so 40% to 56%. So that growth in the cohort is really impressive too. Some things that are of concern. So one thing is that the proficiency is definitely below where our desired state is. So my desired state is that all of our students show proficiency on these state exams. So whether that happens or not is another thing, but that's our goal. Another thing that is a little concerning was that there was actually a cohort that declined from 4th grade into 5th grade. And that's always concerning when grades don't make positive growth. If you look up to the middle school, there's some other things that I think really stand out as being concerning. So some positive things. So we were above the Capital Region BOCES average in ELA for grades 7 and 8 in 2019, which is really great. We also had really good gains in ELA for 8th graders. If you look from 2018 to 2019, they made really good really good growth. And also another positive is that most of our students are taking these state exam scores, or these state exams. There were only 3 opt-outs in 8th grade that year, and that's pretty rare. So in lots of school districts, they still are dealing with lots and lots of opt-outs. Those state exams, while they have their faults, they really do give school districts good information to use when they're planning. So again, it's below our desired state. The thing that is really most concerning to me is our proficiency rates in math in 7th and 8th grade, because what we're seeing is that we're below average, below the regional average in math in 7th and 8th grade. And we also saw a significant drop from 7th grade to 8th grade for that particular cohort. And that's really concerning to me. So middle school math definitely looks like an area of interest, and it was before I got here too. That was already something that was identified. We also take a look at subgroups within those state exams. So we don't just look at the overall, we're also looking at our biggest subgroups, which are students with disabilities and also economically disadvantaged students. So if you look at those, what you see is that students with disabilities, although it's a relatively small number, there's not many of them that were actually achieving proficiency on those state exams. And that's concerning because it shows that maybe it's an approach problem. Of course, these students tend to struggle more than other students, but it doesn't mean they still shouldn't achieve proficiency on exams. If you look at economically disadvantaged students, there's some overlap in those subgroups. But what you see is that even economically disadvantaged students are struggling to achieve proficiency on almost all of the state exams. And so those are not typically numbers that we're looking for. When you look at high school, what you see is we're talking about Regents exams now. What you see is a really strong proficiency across the board. So when I say proficiency in high school, what I'm talking about right now is 65 or above. So a really strong rate of passing on these Regents exams. And also, if you look at the humanities exams, so that first chunk, global history, US history, and ELA, you'll see that there's above 90% passing rates on all of those exams, which is fantastic. There are some areas that stuck out in terms of being a little bit below the BOCES average. And if you look at things like earth science, it's at 77% proficiency, which is a lower passing rate than we'd want out of any course. The other thing that I took a look at was for upper level math and science courses, I'm not just looking for folks who passed those tests, because sometimes that can be misleading. So for example, 90% of students passed the physics exam. The year before, 100% of people passed the physics exam. Well, that can be misleading because very few students actually took those exams. So one of the things I'm looking for is, did people in that cohort challenge themselves by taking upper level math and science courses? And so only 47% of students took Algebra 2, which is, I think Algebra 2 has been a lot of different things over the years, but it is the college that really is the last prep course before you start taking college level math. And so it's important to remember that about 70% of our students go on to college. So if only 47% of our students are prepared to take college level math at that next level, then what that means to me is there might be some students going to college who are taking remedial math or are not yet prepared for college level math. And so that's concerning to me. Whereas about 70% of the cohort took chemistry. So that's that last science course that really shows me that you're ready for that college level work. And so if 70% of students took chemistry, 70% of our students went to college, that seems to line up a little bit better. And again, very, very few students took the physics exam. I also look at college and career readiness. So it's important that you know, just from my orientation, it's not essential to me that all students go on to 4-year or 2-year colleges even. What's essential to me is that upon graduation from high school, students have a plan for what they're going to do next. And oftentimes that plan involves college, additional training. Sometimes it involves entering some kind of post-secondary training for a trade. And sometimes it involves students who have CTE credentials that they've earned because they've entered into a BOCES class. If they've been in a BOCES program where they've earned CTE credit, they might be ready for that career right after high school because they've already earned certification. So some things to note. We did have the highest graduation rate in Capital Region BOCES for the last 2 years. We have a really high rate of students graduating with Regents with advanced designations. And then also some things to look at though are all of our students ready for college level coursework? And are all of our students ready and prepared for whatever the next step in their career is, whether it's work or whether it's college? Are they ready for that next step? And there are some kids who don't have either CTE credentials, aren't going to college, and I wonder if those students are prepared for the next step in their lives. Also took a look at some participation data. And so sometimes this is just a matter of who's taking what courses. So one thing to note is that about 66% of our kids are participating in extracurricular activities, which is really good because our research tells us that when kids do have a connection outside of classes, they tend to stay in school longer and do better in school. We also know that 53% of our graduates last year took at least, that should be art classes, took at least 2 art classes. 48% of our graduates took at least 2 family and consumer science courses. 40% of our students took at least 2 technology courses. We know that 32%, so a third of our students, participate in athletics. 23% of our graduates took at least 2 music courses. So that means took band 2 times, took chorus in a band. 21% of our students had CTE credentials upon graduation. And we know that 5% of last year's graduates took at least 2 business courses. So in looking at all that data and talking to all the people that I talked to, I did notice some strengths and weaknesses, and so did what's called a SWOT analysis. So the strengths that I saw in talking to people was that there's a really strong sense of community in Duanesburg, really strong sense of community in the school, and especially in individual departments. So departments get along well together, grade levels get along well together, not a lot of infighting. People generally work really well together and like each other, which is always a good place to start. I do think that we've been also doing an awful lot of work in elementary school around math, and I think that we're poised to do really well in math in the future because of some changes that have been made. We have really strong district finances, which have allowed us to weather things like pandemics and having state aid withheld from us, which is currently going on in some different areas right now. But still, we have really strong finances and really strong reserves. We have a really good relationship between our staff and our administration, really good relationship with the union and administration. And we also have a really strong partnership in Schoharie County with the other schools in Schoharie County, developing a curriculum partnership. So we've done a lot of curriculum work together as a region, and some of that work has been really successful and noteworthy. So some potential weaknesses that we have are communication things. As always, communication is the most important thing. And so I think that people have noted problems with administration communicating with parents and teachers. And so that's definitely something to watch. Another weakness I noticed was that we didn't have a lot of metrics to actually measure our success or even define for others what our success looked like. And it wasn't necessarily true that all of our measurements for success were aligned with each other. I'm concerned about special ed and economically disadvantaged students' achievement and what we're doing to support those two subgroups. I also am concerned a bit about curriculum alignment, especially in science and ELA from K to 12, making sure that we're doing as good a job in science and ELA with curriculum development as we're doing with math. And of course, that middle school math achievement is something that I'm really looking at. We have a lot of opportunities too. This year, we have just begun an early college program partnership with Schenectady County Community College, where students are going to be able to begin earning an associate's degree while in high school. So kids who are currently in 9th and 10th grade can already take advantage of that. And they'll learn more about that when they select electives in just a week or so. We have learned an awful lot about remote learning over the last year and a half, which only makes us stronger as a district, gives us some opportunities to possibly do some professional development for other people down the road and maybe bring in some revenue to the district by providing classes that we offer here to other schools that don't have those classes. We are on a trajectory to finish our work in curriculum and strengthen science and ELA. We have a lot of opportunities for building partnerships in the region with some different organizations. We now have one-to-one computing, which we didn't have prior to the pandemic, but we have it now. We've also identified people in the community that don't have internet access and have done work to provide them with internet access. So we know what those tech literacy needs are. We also know like what work we have to do to make sure that people can access those things and operate them. And also another opportunity has been just the enormous growth that our staff has made in the last year and a half in terms of their own tech literacy, just out of need. We know that we have a capital project coming up in about 2023. We'll start doing some things for that. And we also know that there's an opportunity to improve equity for all of our students. And so we've been working with the committee to improve equity in our schools, but also working with other organizations to identify problem areas in our school, obstacles for certain subgroups of kids. There's a lot of threats that we have too. COVID-19 is definitely a threat for all of us in terms of, not just in terms of health, but in terms of economic impact. There's also the threat of state takebacks. So there's already been some withholding of funds that were designated to go to schools, like transportation aid and some other things that have been withheld for the time being. We don't know if we're ever going to get those back again. And if the state can't close its budgetary gap, it's told us that it could look at withholding as much as 20% of state aid to schools, which is a considerable amount of money. And would have a big impact on program for our school. I think that a lack of real two-way communication is a threat. So that's why I've tried to do as many forums as possible and I think it's also important for people to not just have the opportunity to be heard, but also to know that their input is going to have some kind of effect on the operations of the school. So that back and forth, I think, is really important. And also that declining enrollment is a threat. And so that's a real problem that we need to take a look at and be cognizant of the fact that that could have a threat to us as a district. So all those things in mind, what I've done is sort of talk to all sorts of people about these issues and then have developed 6 different categories, goal areas that we're going to have in this strategic plan. And so these are the goal areas that I think are going to drive us going forward. So the goal areas that we're going to focus on are academic achievement. When we talk about academic achievement, we're going to talk not just about increasing our proficiency on state exams, but also increasing the number of students who are participating in challenging coursework, because that's also important. We're also taking a look at personal development, so encouraging students not just to take strong academic programs, but also to become well-rounded people through participation in the arts and athletics and extracurricular activities and volunteerism and career development, and also encouraging our staff to grow in their own professional capacity. Also going to look at finances and facilities. So our goal is always to make sure that our buildings are as safe as possible and that we're financially stable, but also making sure that our buildings are attractive and inviting and modern and welcoming to everybody. That goes into our culture section. So another goal area is to foster a culture where all students believe that the school is safe and welcoming and inclusive. We're also going to take a look at partnerships and how to grow the partnerships that we have access to in the region to help kids do what the mission of our school is, which is to fulfill their dreams for the future. We're also going to take a look at communication, and communication in a slightly different way too. So how can communication help enhance the reputation of our district so that we can do things like attract more people to our school district, which is a pretty fantastic school district. So I'm not going to read through all of these. These are going to be on our website, but I am going to give you a summary of some of these things. And then I'll take some questions at the end. So let's talk about academic achievement first. So there's basically all the departments have gone through their own areas that are concerning and have developed goals to address those things. And so all of these goals tend to deal with increasing proficiency. And so if you look at the elementary school, we have goals for increasing proficiency on 3 through 5 state tests for all students, but also taking a look at those students in poverty and trying to determine how do we better reach those students in poverty. And there's lots of different strategies that we're going to take to try to address those students and help make them as successful as they can be in school. Also in elementary school, we're looking at some specific math and reading things that are really foundational. So improving kids' number sense in the elementary school through some different kind of instruction, and also improving K through 2 reading instruction by really working more collaboratively with each other. In the middle school, we're really looking at that middle school math and how and why our scores are lagging behind others in our region. And in general, developing a more cohesive middle school program. So I've done a lot of research recently on best practices in middle school programs in order to address the 6th grade. So there's a lot of back and forth about what should happen with the 6th grade. And so the other night at a board meeting, I talked about our plans for 6th grade, which isn't going to be to relocate them to the high school at this time, but it is definitely going to be to increase the supports that we're providing the 6th grade, giving them more access to some of the electives that they would have seen if they were in the other building, and also working on our transitional programs into 6th grade. So really making sure that our 6th grade program is a focal point and not an afterthought. So right now we really have an extended elementary school and an extended high school program. And so I really want to focus on that middle school program as a cornerstone to making sure that we fill in the gaps that were left by elementary school and get kids ready for high school so that they can be as successful as they can be. In the high school, all the departments looked at a lot of different individual needs. Just to summarize, a lot of these departments have specific goals related to writing and also using evidence to be able to write. And so that's really the case in almost every department, is looking about how to improve their writing and supporting claims. And so hopefully there'll be a lot of interdisciplinary interaction with those folks. When we look at personal development, we're really talking about increasing the well-roundedness of our students. So some of those areas where we saw not so high participation, like music and business, we're really looking to increase participation in those areas. And so as a measurement tool, taking a look at how many kids are taking not just one business class, but 2 by graduation, how many people are staying in music for more than 1 year in chorus or band or both, and also trying to make sure that our kids are as well-rounded as they can be. We're also taking a look at the technology capacity of our staff. So we've been forced to learn an awful lot really fast, and unless we do some things to support that learning, it's going to go away. So we want to make sure that people kind of keep those skills that they've earned over the last year and a half. And another thing that we're going to be doing is aligning our PD goals, our professional learning, with our growth needs by personalizing the professional learning that we provide to staff. Not just giving a one-size-fits-all approach, but actually individualizing PD based on the needs of each teacher. When we're looking at our facilities and finance, we have already done step 1, which is develop a 5-year planning forecast for our district. You can see that if you go to our board docs section of our website. You can find a 5-year projection about what might happen in our district. Certainly there's a lot that we don't know, but there's a lot that we do know based on history and a lot of planning that we can do. We also are underway in planning a capital project that will start doing some things in 2023. And we're really looking at instructional spaces with that capital project and how we're going to modernize some spaces, especially in the junior, senior high school, to kind of bring those up to the same level that modern classrooms are. When we look at culture, we're really looking at this idea of mental wellness and increasing our stakeholders' perception of how many resources we really have. So encouraging people to seek out counselors and social workers and our mental health clinic and all those other resources that we have in school. We're also looking at right now developing an equity plan to support students who might feel left out in our community. And so our goal is to finish that by 2022. And we're looking at how to increase our ability to measure whether stakeholders would recommend our school district to others. So that's really important to me, that all of you and all of your neighbors feel good about recommending Duanesburg to other people who might be looking to move into an area nearby. When we're looking at partnerships, we're looking at ways that we can deepen our partnerships in higher ed. So I already mentioned the partnership that we have building with Schenectady County Community College, but we live in a really rich region for higher ed. And so kind of increasing our relationships with all those institutions can only benefit us. And also looking to explore some other revenue streams that might be available to us through grants and through partnerships. And finally, when we're talking about communication, what we're looking at is to improve our internal and external communications. So doing things like having forums online, scheduling things so that people who can't come out to the school can still see videos online, sending emails to people using our One Call Now system, making sure that everybody knows what's going on in our schools is really important to me. Also, another thing that we're doing internally is having more one-on-one conversations with staff people. So our administrators all, during the first quarter of the year, met individually with every single person they supervise and completed a rounding session, which is really a session to check in to make sure that everything's going okay. And then increasing our kind of brand value of Duanesburg by improving a lot of our communications methods. Things like improving our website, improving our logos, making them more consistent, making our materials look more professional. So those things are bound to help us over time with increasing our reputation and value around the region if we spend a lot of time making sure that we're not just sending communication out to the people who already live in our district, but also to people who might be outside of our district. How do we sell ourselves to people who might be looking to move into a district in this area? And then also increasing our district's transparency with the public. So soon, I think within the next few weeks, you'll see something on the bottom of our homepage that actually will be a direct link to all of the district data that you could possibly want, whether it's financial or academic, in a really easily digestible format. And so the goal with that is to make it so that anybody in the district who wants to can look at any of the data that you might be interested in knowing about. So making sure that people know that, you know, we're putting tax dollars to good use, but we're also not hiding what we're doing with those tax dollars.